Dory 1, this is Fireteam Delta. Dad's coming home.
Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Cloy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. Welcome back to Fatherhood Friday. This is your official start to the weekend. I am your host, Ben Cloy, and today we got a special message coming to you from a son of a soldier who is currently deployed, who messaged me on Instagram. And so for the sake of anonymity, I'm going to call the young teenager Mark for the sake of this episode. And I'm going to deep dive into the advice that I gave him and the wisdom I gave him and expand a little bit on the overall role that fathers can play when we are there. And so Mark reached out and said, I miss my dad, and I don't know who else to talk to, and I don't know what else to do. And it really hit me hard because I'd never been asked that question. I've talked about it on the podcast, but I've never actually had a real person reach out and say, I'm struggling, I miss my dad, and I don't know what to do. And so this was kind of one of those universal, like, knocking on the door, like, this is where you could be a friend to a young man who needs that friend to help him get him through, and to know that while his father isn't there, that to remind him that his father loves him, to give him a path that he could follow while his father is away, and just give him some wisdom that someone cared enough to actually enter his life and help him through something. Because a lot of what we go through in society today, we have that belief that most people aren't going to give us the light of day to help us when we need it. And I wanted to be the opposite for this young man. So Mark, you asked me that question, and it hit me really hard when you asked me it. I didn't know exactly what to say, but then once I realized where you were at, and once I was understanding what you were feeling, I felt like there was only one answer that I could give you. And that answer is one I gave you, but I want to unpack it for everybody listening to this, because what I gave Mark was this idea and question. I asked him, what are some of the things that you did when your dad was there that made you really feel connected? And he said, playing football, going fishing, playing board games. And I said back to him that this is your blueprint for connection. That oftentimes I feel like our kids that get left behind while parents are deployed is they just don't understand the toolkit and how to operate the tools in order to reconnect with a parent that's not there, because nothing prepares a child for his parent to go away for a year at a time. That is just something that, even if it happened as an adult and it was your wife or husband, vice versa, it would be difficult for even an adult with all the emotional experience and life wisdom that we already have. Imagine that happening for a kid. And that's where Mark was. And so when he said those things, football, fishing, board games, I reminded him that this is the blueprint that his father left. Now, we don't call it that when we're doing it, but these are the anchor memories, just like Inside Out, that creates the personality of who you are. This is where you can go visit to the connection of who you are, the connection to your father. This is where you can almost step into the moment and be like, if you're going fishing, for example, and your dad's deployed, I'll use this scenario as an example. If you go fishing and you're out there fishing and you're having fun, but maybe you've got a really big question on your heart and you're really not sure how to answer it, and you're like, man, or maybe you've got a girl problem and you're like, man, I wish my dad was here to help me through this. If you go fishing and you're out there, that's the most perfect time to ask another good question. What would dad do? Because when you're connected to those, the energy, the memory, all of that combined, it creates like a superpower within your head to really tap into what would dad do and what wisdom would he give me? Because I'm in that moment where I truly felt connected to my father and who he is and everything that he's done for me in my life. Those are the moments where you can feel reconnected. And that was the advice I gave Mark. I told him, find those memories where you felt most connected to your dad. Try to do those things with other people, friends, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever it may be. But when you connect with those memories, you get a chance to connect with him. Now, this answer is twofold. His dad is still alive, just deployed. But there's another scenario where dads don't come home. And this potential Mark could be in the same boat. It could be devastating. There could be another Mark out there listening to this that did lose his dad. that situation is the same. I miss my dad and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get rid of this feeling of emptiness that I just want to be connected with my dad again, because those memories fueled me. They got me excited. They made me feel like I was being led somewhere in life. And now he's gone. I don't know how to feel. I don't know where to go. I've talked and coached so many men that have lost their father at a young age. And the most common thread that they speak to is they feel the lack of being led somewhere. If their father, maybe as a teenager or even younger, once their dad leaves their life, there's almost like this off point where they're no longer being led on this journey of life and understanding and connection and curiosity and adventure. And they all get stuck. And then they get stuck where they're not being led anywhere. I know we were talking to Bobby Dove back in November, and he brought up that he felt like he was 12 years old for most of the time until he went into the Army. And he lost his father to cancer around 12, and he never really grew up from 12. His mentality kind of just stopped growing because he stopped being led. And so that's a huge component of that feeling that you miss your dad, because he was leading you somewhere. And that felt really exciting. But man, when that's gone, what do you do? Like, that's a heavy, heavy feeling to work through. And that's what Mark's going through. And his dad's got the same thing on the other side where he's deployed. I haven't talked to Mark's dad before, but I know from speaking to so many dads, I can only imagine what he's feeling. And if he does listen to this episode, I can only imagine the feeling of connection of like he just wants to help his son remove this pain, because in some ways, the double standard of what military dads have to go through is we feel like we inflicted it on our kids because it was our choice to leave. Maybe not leave, but our choice to be in the military. And then we feel like this burden because we inflicted this, and then we feel shame connected to this. So on both sides of this, it can be really difficult to manage the emotion. But the most important rule we have to remember is that whenever emotion comes up, it's not something to be suppressed, it's to be understood. And this is a great example of something that needs to be understood. So this emotion's coming up because you desire that connection. And so then the secondary part of that is, how do you create it? And that's the blueprint, then the question from I asked him. Go fishing, go play football with a friend, go play board games with a family member. Any of those things will allow you to be connected with dad. And I was foreshadowing something where if you did lose your dad, maybe there's a daughter or a son listening to this and you have lost your dad. And there's nothing that I can do or say to bring your dad back. But there would be nothing I wish more than for your father to jump into your life right now and remind you you are loved. He is so proud of you. And he appreciates everything you taught him about in life while he was here. But even that's not going to remove that pain that they're feeling on their heart, because they still have this deep desire to be connected to dad and understand how to be led in life. Where am I supposed to go? That is the role that fathers have in our kids' life, helping them craft the destination of where they could go, seeing the potential that they can't see themselves, and helping them craft that journey to get there. And when we're out of our kids' life, they feel that almost stationary moment because they're no longer being led. They're almost kind of just waiting and pause for their dad to come home to pick up where they left off. And so if your dad didn't come home, the same advice applies. There was an episode way back in 2019, Ashley Buggy came on the podcast. Her husband died in a scuba diving accident, and all of her kids were really young. She was pregnant 6 months with their unborn child when he passed away. So she had a child that didn't even get a chance to see into his dad's eyes. And her journey, her story really allowed me to see the path for being connected to a dad that maybe you never really got to know. And so her husband lived without a bucket list. He PCS'd to Hawaii from San Diego on a sailboat with a bunch of other guys. He always did exactly what he wanted to, and he just did it. And there was no regrets. If he wanted to do it, he just did it. And as we were having this conversation, she gave me this wisdom and perspective that anytime one of those kids needs to be connected to dad, to a man they barely knew, all they need to do is do something adventurous. Do something that dad would do. because that was the overarching principle. He lived his life and actually brought that principle into her life. And even when I interviewed, they were in Europe going through just the basic tourist stuff of Europe. I mean, they had just visited Auschwitz a few days prior, and their kids were all under 5. So all of these memories were allowing them to connect with Dad. Because when you can do something that Dad would do, you can ask the most important question that you need to ask yourself. I alluded to it earlier. What would Dad do? What would Dad do? That is your most fundamental question that a child is either left behind because his father didn't come home, or his father's just not there. And in Mark's case, that's a question he probably runs into on a daily basis. Is there's something in my life that I wish Dad could be here to talk about, but he's not. I have this burning desire to answer this question, what would Dad do? But I don't know this answer. The blueprint. The blueprint is the possibility to connect with Dad in a way that is not physical, it's spiritual. Think about the temperature of the sun when it was hitting you in this moment. Try to paint it as clear as possible. The clearer you can paint this memory in your head, the clearer the wisdom that your father can deliver from miles away and maybe even beyond the grave, because you will be able to be connected to the memory of how your father lived. And how a man lived is what he lived by. The things that a man does every day are the things that a man believes in. And so when you want to remember what Dad would do, all you need to do is look at how he lived his life. And when he showed up in your life, these are the extra special moments. These are the extra special moments that give you a window into his thought processes of what he valued most. Because if he spent time with you, he valued you most. And that's the most important part. That no matter whether your dad's here or not, is your dad loved you, he appreciated you, and he loved you. And he saw you because he showed up in your life. He knew where you needed to go. And he did these things to help get connected to who you were so that you could become everything that he knew that you could become. And so just remember, Mark, I know it's hard. I know that it's not easy battling this feeling of missing Dad. But the more you dive into the moments that you got most connected to your dad, the more that you are understanding of what would Dad do. Now I'm going to flip it a little bit and talk to Dad. And every dad that maybe has a daughter or a son that they've left behind on a deployment, or maybe potentially leaving behind, because at the core of this entire episode and the core of the blueprint is you have to have the memories. You yourself need to come home, connect with your kids, create an emotional experience and memory that allows them to connect with you and understand what would Dad do. You can't do this by sitting at the office. You can't do this by burying yourself in a bunch of emails. You can't do this when your daughter comes in and asks you to go play Barbies or have a tea party while you're saying, I'm too busy, I'm at work. You can't create any of that blueprint for your child to understand who you are, to be connected with who you are, and feel like they're being led to a place by your presence. You can't do any of that until you come home. So it is imperative for this blueprint to work. You yourself need to create these memories. You need to be able to do fun things. You need to be able to do things that they want to do. You might be saying, like, this is all great, Ben, but I don't really know what to do. There's actually a great way to cheat at this process. And it's so simple, it's stupid, but it actually works brilliantly. And the best part is, it's 10 times easier than you actually think it is in your head. And that is, give the keys to your kids. Hey, Dad's got some spare time on Saturday. What do you want to do more of with Dad? Or another frame, if you're sitting down having a conversation with your kids, what do you wish you did more of with your dad? Or what did you wish that Dad did more of with you? Any of these flavors of these questions allows you to give them the keys, and they'll tell you exactly what they need. They'll tell you exactly what they dream about. They'll tell you exactly like, man, I really wish that we could just go down to that river we drive by and throw a pole in it. I've been dreaming about it, and I've been afraid to ask you, but man, that would just make me feel like $1 million. And they probably won't say it like that, but that moment will be a simple answer. You're like, man, that's all you really want? I was in my head thinking like, oh, we need to do this big epic trip. We need to go hiking in the mountains. No. All he wanted was to go fishing down in the stream that you drive by every day and spend it with his dad. So guys, it's a two-sided coin. In order for your kids to understand this blueprint, one, you have to speak about it. You have to help them understand that this is the blueprint to connect with dad when I'm not here. Now that could be after you're no longer physically here because something happened to you, or you're just deployed. The blueprint applies in both cases. But let me tell you, this blueprint can be the one thing that allows your child to thrive on the other side of never being able to feel his father's love again. Because as long as your kids have a blueprint of connecting with dad, that blueprint will serve generationally, not just within your life. And so to wrap up this episode, a couple things. One, Mark, remember, I know it's not easy. Your dad will come home, and find those methods to connect with your dad's memories, because if you can live in those moments, everything can be feeling like he's right there with you, even though he's not. And second, dads, you've got to have a plan. You've got to be able to create these memories in order for your kids to use the blueprint that I just gave Mark. Now, luckily, Mark had ideas of ways to connect with his dad, and he was able to think about it already. And I probably just had a 15-minute conversation with him on Instagram. By the end of that, he was already feeling better. Better than he had been feeling in a long, long time. And so it doesn't take much. It just takes a little perspective. It takes a little bit of pointing in the right direction, like this is where you go to connect with dad. And as long as your kids can do that, like I said, no matter how long your time on this earth is, you will always leave your kids in a better place because they will always be able to connect with dad.